What we see is people looking at these people as nothing more than an easy, quick dollar. They don't want to offer them the human connection and respect of getting to know them. And if your name pops up, they will just figure, well, I'll just keep messaging them. And then eventually they'll give me something. We need to understand what motivates them and what are the issues that matter to them.
I'm Caitlin Huxley, and this is The Art of Campaigns, where I talk to industry experts about election strategy. Today, I'm talking to Justin Nudo. Justin is a political fundraiser, the founder and president of E3In Strategies, a Democrat fundraising firm that empowers candidates from launch to election day. Thanks for being here, Justin.
Excited to join, Caitlin. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's jump right into it. The first thing on my docket is small dollar donors. Every time you hear people talk about anything donor related in the industry, as of the last couple of election cycles, you hear about how we are churning and burning our donors to death. We're unable to get a hold of donors who we had last election cycle. They're just not interested as they used to be. And a lot of people are blaming that on the constant churn and burn. We call these people too often, we ask for too much, and we give back too little. What are
Agree with
your
that.
thoughts on that?
What we see is this churn and burn being nothing more than people not wanting to actually connect with folks. They are looking at these people as nothing more than an easy, quick dollar, and they don't want to offer them the human connection and respect of getting to know them. And I think that's what happens with a lot of fundraisers today. I think it's very common, especially on the Democratic side,
Oh,
that
yeah.
you have a lot of these folks who are going out to candidates and selling them text messaging or selling them email strategies or selling them social media fundraising buys to try and generate small dollar donors. And it's
Mm.
not often that you get a lot of these fundraisers who are saying, "Hey, let's make phone calls to call people and connect with them and understand what the issue is to them. And maybe we'd be able to better message to these folks when it comes time to vote if we did some of that." And the only way to really change that is to change the technology, which it's not going to happen.
Like, what would
Well,
you change?
what I would change is that we would go back to a point where you have true grassroots movements, people on the ground, people who are talking to each other. Sure, we see some of that within cities, but you don't see it often in the suburbs. You don't see it often in rural areas. The only grassroots way to get together in a lot of these places is online, unfortunately. But it doesn't provide that same human connection.
We've all seen the increase in the availability of new tech, making it easier to reach these donors, easier to ask them for money, easier to remind you that they exist so you can go back to that well just at the right time to get that extra donation. A few years ago, I think there was some scandal with the recurring donation button automatically being checked on a lot of campaigns. We're just finding new ways to cheat donors out of a little extra cash or a little extra connection to the actual campaign. And it's funny because when we talk to voters, it's exactly this. We're trying to have a simulated personal connection where we know people going to the door helps, and so we send people to the door. We don't really try outside of events to make that connection with donors. Is there something you would suggest we do as an industry?
Well, before I answer that, I want to mention that opt-out strategy.
Yeah.
That's taken directly from an MBA course book. I did that over
Really?
at my MBA over at NYU, and that was one of the interesting pieces of information that we learned was that creating having that box already checked and making people opt out, you actually
Yeah.
increase the probability of people staying opted in and getting recurring donation. Nothing
But it's
spectacular
kind of
about it.
gross, right?
There's studies done on this stuff that it increases the probability of people staying connected with you and giving money.
Doesn't that contribute almost directly to what we're talking about? Folks being squeezed for a little extra cash. There's going to be some percentage of people who didn't mean to keep that clicked, right?
Absolutely. There's going to be people that didn't realize that they needed to click out of it to opt out. So yeah, you can have that, of course, but there's also a very well-known thing called resolicitation in political fundraising. And that's essentially that once a month, those people who had already given you money, we're going to ask them again for another contribution. It's not the big dollar cash flow, but you know, 100 people at $100 a month, that adds up.
So it makes a
Helps with
difference for
expenses and
the campaign.
does
Say that
make a
again.
difference. It does make a difference.
Personally, I feel like, well, one, my information definitely gets shared from organization to organization from year to year. I rarely give to campaigns. I have on occasion. And back in 2010, I bought some funky colored George Bush socks. For the next, half a dozen years, I got absolutely spammed with these low dollar fundraising asks. And I just feel like that lack of attention to look at why I was engaged, to what got me involved. To your point, the top issue when it comes to voters is one of the big questions. But when it comes to donors, nobody seems to care.
There's a very simple reason for that. People just don't want to do as much work as they need to understand who's actually donating. Your name is on a list, you donated X amount of dollars, and if your name pops up and they've got a valid number, they will just figure, well, I'll just keep spending money to keep messaging them, and then eventually they'll give me something. Because what is that? 7 or 6 cents per text message? They don't care because it's going billed to the client and the candidate anyway, who, by the way, is raising money from large donors. So it's not even their own money. So there's a lack of interest and a lack of will to actually understand what the underlying data is telling them.
All right. So what's the actual solution? In game theory, there's this idea of the Nash equilibrium. That is, we're all playing a strategy, a game against each other. And there's no reason for me to deviate from my current strategy unless there's a way that I can improve my results. So there's some famous scenarios like the prisoner's dilemma where nobody can change to improve themselves positively. And I feel like that's where we're at. If a campaign cannot change strategy to improve their own return, it doesn't benefit them. And they don't have the long horizon, the 10-year plus that it really takes to care if a donor burns out and stops giving. Like you said, it costs 5 cents to try. The return on investment
Sure.
of spamming these people to death is crazy high.
Let me stop you there for a second, though, because what you have is that, yes, these individual campaigns, they're not built for this. They're not built to do all of this deep dive data work. That's what the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee are supposed to be for. Unfortunately, they've been lagging a lot on that. And the data is just not up to date. They haven't been keeping up with it. But, again, at the top of the party, what's their incentive to do that type of work? So, for them, again, a 5 cent loss times a million.
Yeah, so what can we actually do about it?
So with the larger campaigns that have the ability to use lower level staffers to make these personalized outreach calls to these folks who are $25, $50, $100 donations given to the campaign, follow this sort of approach, you are going to have much more focus and understanding of those small dollar donors versus just calling the big donors and then just churning and burning these small folks. We need to understand what moves them, what motivates them to give money to politics, and what are the issues that matter to them.
So that really segues well into the next topic, is independent expenditures and these PACs. Besides large individuals, they're the best way to get a lot of money in one stop. The more down ballot races often have a lot of trouble accessing this money. Do you have any tips or tricks that small candidates can use to try and access this fund?
So with independent expenditure committees, I generally see these pop up because there's campaign contribution limits, and you have another separated by a firewall fundraiser who is running that side, and then you have the campaign committee, right? And on the independent expenditure side, it's simply to go after the biggest dollars possible with unlimited amounts of checks. No first time candidate without a large network is going to ever get involved in an independent expenditure. I will mention that PACs, you have a little bit better of an opportunity, right? PAC money can be a little bit more objective, where they actually look at what the candidate is doing, what their background is, what they're saying they're going to try and accomplish. So there are opportunities there where first time candidates can get PAC support and money from PACs. Unions, labor, I believe they have a much stronger relational bond, very similar that you'd see with other your large scale institutional donor networks. And by building those relationships and playing the politics of labor, so those are relationships that are very difficult to break. And it's even let's just talk for an example here about the 2024 election with labor. Labor
Yeah.
leadership, labor leadership went for the Democrats, right? But the actual membership swayed towards the Republican side. You're seeing that happen in the membership base, but that leadership,
Hmm.
there's so much strong relationship there that it's very difficult to break into that circle.
Interesting. Let's say you have that support from the base, from the average member. Is there a way to use that support to pressure leadership?
I think that's difficult. I know that you are a reader of Sun Tzu's Art of War. And one thing that is a common recurrence throughout history is that leaders often don't know when they need to leave. In that is that they make decisions for their membership that the membership as a majority may not agree with. And if that's the case, what you have then is change. Change comes, right? The membership will end up voting out its leadership that didn't move in its direction. And then that's when you have an opportunity where those relationships aren't built with the new leadership to come in as a new candidate and build those relationships.
I see. So it's not going to happen this cycle, and it's not going to happen for you, but maybe you'll get lucky. Okay. Harsh, but fair. So I'm very data focused in my approach. And last episode, I talked to a pollster. We talked a lot about modeling for voters and how that can be used to model for volunteers instead. And I wonder if you've ever used a similar approach to model out your donors and if there's maybe a secret sauce you can share with us.
Well, my time over at NYU, a classmate of mine and we were working on a program that we named Ferris. And what that is a program that we've built that takes in donor data and it cross-references contact information, from separate databases talking to each other. In addition to that, we could pull information from across the internet. And we've also done a manual, believe it or not, a manual tagging of candidates. So different candidates have different attributes, right? So you've got candidates who are particular issue types of candidates. Look at demographics.
Okay.
We look at what's their background, right? What
So
have they
the
done?
coalitions that they appealed to in their time.
Correct. So, like,
Okay.
were they part of teacher unions in the past? Were they part of the police or firemen, military,
Okay.
LGBTQ community, you know, so on and so forth? And we tag these attributes to the candidate. So then when we have a new candidate that we're working with, we say, oh, by the way, you match a lot of the profile of this previous candidate that was in your state, that was, a couple counties over, a couple districts over. And, we find those donors who were matching them. Okay.
Okay. Very
And
cool.
and what we do then also is that we look for all of those types of candidates that match that attribute in the state. And from that point, we will look at the individual donors and see if they've popped up multiple times across these different candidates with similar attributes. And we find those
Interesting.
people who have two, three, four times showing up on multiple campaigns. And we're like, this is the priority. So, anyways, we've built this entire system. It's called Ferris. We're releasing it to candidates for the 2026 election cycle, and
Oh,
it's one of those items that if you are a candidate, you have no idea who you need to be contacting. You will increase your likelihood of getting larger contributions from folks who already want to be helping you.
that's really
Exactly.
cool. Okay, I don't know of anyone else doing that. And if I wanted to find out more, where would I go?
You would go right to our website, e3nstrategies.com.
So it sounds like you guys are doing some next level
Yes.
work over there. Why is it so hard for me to find not just a good fundraiser, but a fundraiser in general? You know, if you need somebody to help you with mail, you're tripping over them. You know, on LinkedIn, I add people and I'm getting asked, you know, hey, let's do a quick call to talk about my voter database. Like, okay, there's plenty of those, but I have to dig deep. Like, I have to put on an archaeologist hat to find a fundraiser who's
Yeah.
not terrible.
Because it's hard work, because it's difficult
Okay, door
work.
knocking is hard work. No one wants to do that. Volunteer recruitment is hard work, but there's a billion of this. Is it just that it's high
Yeah,
skill and a lot of work? That can't be it.
there's, well, it's hard, and it's hard work because it requires a scientific process, but it also requires the ability to be a social, connectable human being. A lot of people in this world are
Mhm.
either one or the other, and not a lot of people are both. Okay. Um, in addition to that, I believe the best fundraisers understand human psychology and can really empathize and understand who they're speaking to and be able to speak and understand just about anybody. How many people do you know in the political consulting business were telephone salespeople? Okay.
Well, I mean, all of us used to make volunteer phone calls, but not all of us were good at it.
So how many of those volunteer phone calls did you ask somebody for a $10,000 check? There's a very specific way to ask
Mm.
people for money. If you get on the phone and you go, "Hey, I was wondering if, you could maybe write me a check for, like, I don't know, $500 if you've got it."
Yeah, that's okay. That's not a winning sales pitch. You can tell right
No,
away.
but if no, but if I call you up and I give you the whole spiel and talk to you and listen to your problems
Hmm.
and offer solutions and what I'm going to do when I get into office, and then I say, in order to do that, I've got to win this campaign. And in order to win this campaign, I need your support. I need your support. I need your help. Can you give me a $500 contribution today? That
Okay.
sells.
All right.
You know,
So call time, then it sucks. Every candidate hates doing it. And it's like pulling teeth, making them do it. Everyone knows they have to do it. And everybody who trains anybody tells them that you're going to be spending 70+% of your time, fundraising, doing more fundraising.
it's like that for candidates who have never done call time. And why is that? Because you can go from a situation of you call one random guy in the middle of somewhere, New York, and they really love you. They love your campaign. They love what you're about. And here's $1,000. We sent it to your ActBlue account. Oh, that's freaking awesome. Amazing. You get another person. Hey, I'm going to send you 2 grand. I really like you. Even more amazing,
Okay.
right? But they didn't send that money yet. Okay. And then you've got 100 other people who told you to piss off. They don't want you calling them. They don't care. I don't know you. Things like that. Okay. And you go from these highs to these deep lows every single day, and it just burns candidates out.
How do you keep them going when 80% of what we're going to be doing is fundraising, picking up the phone and calling these donors who are going to tell you to piss off or maybe not send the money or just waste your time talking about their problems?
Mm.
What's the actual solution here?
It goes back to that piece that I said earlier, that it's understanding human psychology. And when people are in this mindset that it's a personal reflection on them from the people saying, I don't want to give you money,
Yeah.
it really messes with their mind, right? So
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
to you have to frame it to the candidate as well, so they can understand this. This is the first time they're doing this. They're getting all these emotional feelings, and they have no clue how to respond other than, that makes me feel like crap. So you have to talk to the
Fair.
candidate and make sure that you frame it in a way that this is nothing reflected on you. You are calling somebody on a telephone. They have no idea who you are, what you look like. They only know what you sound like and what your name is. It's nothing personal. And this entire process is all about just moving forward. It's like being in
Okay.
deep mud. And the only way you're going to get out of it is by putting the next foot forward. And eventually you get into grassier fields. And as
Okay.
long as you do the process, you're going to see results. It's a numbers game.
Just accepting that it's a slog and that they have to get through it. It's not a personal representation of who they are because this person doesn't know who they are.
A lot of people find out during call time.
So, to close us off here, gimmicks and ineffective methods. Every small campaign tries to run these low dollar fundraising events, right? Let's go to a bar, invite 50, people. If we can get 50 people to get $50 each, that's as good as, call time where I get $2,000 donors. And it is sort of, if the math works that way. But, I think I've never really seen these things pan out in the way that people hope. Is there something that I'm always doing wrong, which is entirely possible? Or is it just not effective?
They can be effective. What you don't have
Okay.
is a strong host committee. Um,
Okay, so I'm doing it wrong. That's good. I mean, that means I can improve.
you need a strong host committee. I am a firm believer that um, you don't just have an event just to have an event, because the only person that's satisfying is the candidate. I'm a firm believer that you have zero events as a candidate until
Okay.
you have a host committee who is enthusiastic and is willing to conduct outreach into their network. Otherwise, you are continuously reaching out to the same people in your candidate's network or within the campaign's network that you already know, you've already communicated with, and it gets stale. So the key is identifying those key hosts who have unique networks that they will actually reach out to those networks, not just by an email, but they will make some follow up phone calls and get people involved. And they'll get the candidate on the phone with some of these folks prior to the event, because that's how you actually increase the probability of people showing up and donating prior to the event.
So what I'm hearing is that in-person fundraisers, these small dollar fundraisers, are secretly call time. Right? Someone else can do the call time to get these people, jazzed up and get them on the phone with the candidate, but then it's more secret call time.
Yep.
It's weird how so many things come back to that personal connection, right?
It makes a big difference. Yes, it makes a big difference.
Last big major question. So you mentioned real briefly that the percentage of folks who answer their phones is going down and that texts don't work, emails don't work. But how do you do call time in an era where calls are answered at such a lower rate? Is
So
is a text okay if it's personal and we're having an actual conversation? Is a Facebook DM acceptable? When we talk to voters, we talk about having a conversation with them the way they want to have it. So with younger people, that's via texts or via DMs or something like that. But for older folks, it's on the phone. What's your approach when it comes to call time and using these new methods of contact?
okay. So the idea here is that we want to increase the probability of people knowing the candidates and
Mhm.
staying on the phone with them. So the way to go about that is we found a couple different methods. Number one is that we want to identify our call list and make connections within the network that we already have, right? So we've got this
Okay.
donor network, and we're constantly asking the people who we are asking for money for new connections to people. The secondary ask is, do you have 3 other people, 5 other people that you can get me in contact with? So you're building a natural network, right?
Okay, I have like warm leads.
You're sort of creating warm leads, yes.
Okay.
Um, a secondary way that I found, let's say you have a call list that you've basically created from a donor list that has no connection to your campaign whatsoever. It's kind of like all those donors from
Okay.
across the state that I was talking about earlier that match your
Yeah.
candidate's profile.
Okay.
Um, in that scenario, if we have email addresses for those folks, we want to get an introductory email to them about the candidate prior to us actually having phone calls with them,
I
making
see.
a outreach. Why do we do that? Because um, these candidates are totally unknown, the majority of them. Most people don't pay attention to elections until the last week or 2 weeks before the election, right?
Okay.
So people don't even know who's running for office. And oftentimes, same thing goes for these donors. But if you send them an email or a text message that just quickly has their name and then something about their candidacy, people see that. They go, oh, I remember that name.
Building that
Mailers
name
are
ID.
exactly. And it's the same idea with contributions. We're sending emails, text messages just to prime the donor. So you get, oh, this is Caitlin Huxley. You've been annoying me with emails. What's up?
Okay, so a DM is fine, a text is fine, as long as it's here's a little bit about me. Let's set up a time to talk because you can't make an ask via a text or they'll just ghost you. That's hard to hear for a lot of candidates who don't want to be on the phones. That the end all be all of call time is the call, but it's I think it's obvious. So I
Let's
just
see.
want to thank you for taking the time to come on and share with me and with the watchers and on YouTube and the listeners on Spotify your wisdom and tips and tricks for getting better at fundraising.
Yeah, love the time. Thanks for having me.